My Lords, questions on a statement made in the House of Commons yesterday on digital ID.
My Lords, we unequivocally oppose the government's dangerous, mandatory digital ID policy, both in principle and in practice. If allowed to become legislation, the electorate risks being subject to an extraordinary expansion of state power, one that comes not only at the expense of personal freedom, but at great cost to the taxpayer. Before I outline our objections to this proposal, it is important first to understand the wider context in which this policy has been announced. Over the year in government, an estimated 50,000 people have entered the country on small boats, the largest recorded number to date. But the Secretary of State has claimed digital IDs will deter these illegal migrants. My Lords, where is the evidence for this claim? Criminal gangs and illegal workers already operate outside formal employment and taxation systems. They don't care about paperwork or credentials. They work illegally beyond the reach of existing regulation. They subvert existing national insurance requirements. So why would we expect digital ID to be different? To suggest that a digital ID would somehow deter these operations is untested, it is unfounded, it is too optimistic to be convincing. We're concerned too about the vast scope of this program. The government has also claimed that digital IDs will result in, and I quote, more joined up public services, saving people time from having to restate personal details to multiple departments. Here the government seems to me to conflate separate issues: more effective public services and curbing illegal migration. They promise an end to bureaucracy while simultaneously constructing one of the most intrusive systems of state surveillance in our nation's history. This is vast in its objectives, slight in its detail, and frankly, creepy in its reach into our privacy. Better online services do not require a centralized identity regime. We already have mechanisms such as right-to-work checks and DBS verification. These have all been designed with consent and privacy in mind, with nobody forced to pursue the digital route. The government's policy would herald an end to that freedom. My Lords, this policy was not even in the government's manifesto. There is no democratic mandate for digital ID, nor is there any appetite for it. In fact, over 2.8 million people have already signed a petition opposing it. If, all of that said, the government does go ahead with this policy, then we urge them to mitigate the risks and the costs in three ways. First, can they please ensure the system is designed as a decentralized tool using the blockchain to give citizens privacy and security? Second, to ensure some adherence to its stated goals, we urge the government to adopt an agile approach, test and iterate rather than a build once model. And third, can the government please clarify and limit the stated goals? The current scope is simply too broad to be realistic. Digital IDs, my Lords, fundamentally shift the burden of proof between citizens and government. In a free democracy, it is the state, not citizens, that must justify its actions. Under this scheme, one's ability to rent, to open a bank account, even or to order a drink, would be conditional on the possession of a government-issued digital ID. When the ability to work is conditioned on digital state-approved credentials, meaningful consent ceases to exist. The choice between non-participation and never being able to work again is no choice at all. My Lords, last week the Foreign Secretary proposed issuing digital IDs for those as young as 13. Once implemented, this policy will further infringe on people's lives. Today it is to determine the right to work. Tomorrow it could be the right to vote or to travel. Digital IDs are accompanied also by a litany of practical problems and challenges, not least the enormous and real cybersecurity risk. The UK's own sign-on system was breached only months ago during testing. The National Cybersecurity Centre is yet to endorse the scheme. Further, 8.5 million adults lack the requisite digital skills to make use of these IDs. Many do not own a smartphone or have reliable internet access. Labour's Digital Inclusion Action Plan is currently inadequate for need and does not account for the structural barriers that vulnerable individuals face. Finally, this presumably comes at a very considerable cost to the taxpayer. Perhaps when he speaks, the noble Lord the Minister could give us some estimate of the likely costs for hardware, software, development and operations of the system. My Lords, the government's proposal for digital IDs is costly, controlling and risky. We do not think it will stop the boats. We do not think it will streamline services without very significant and as yet unknowable investments and programme delivery. Instead, we are concerned it represents an illegitimate state encroachment on people's privacy that they themselves are forced to fund. We are deeply alarmed.
My Lords, the introduction of compulsory digital ID represents another fundamental error by this government. The Liberal Democrats strongly oppose this proposal, which is a serious threat to privacy, civil liberties and social inclusion. We thank the Secretary of State for we thank the Minister for repeating the Secretary of State's statement today, but my disappointment and opposition to the government's plan more than mirrors that of my friend Victoria Collins in the Commons yesterday. The core issue here is not technology, but freedom. The government insists this scheme is non-compulsory, yet concurrently confirms that it will be mandatory for right-to-work checks by the end of this Parliament. This is mandatory digital ID in all but name, especially for working-age people. As my party leader, Sir Ed Davey, has stated, we cannot and will not support a system where citizens are forced to hand over private data simply to participate in everyday life. This is state overreach, plain and simple. The Secretary of State quoted Finland in the ability of parents to register for daycare. But, my Lords, I think the Secretary of State needs to do a bit more research. That is a voluntary scheme, not a compulsory scheme, my Lords. We've already seen the clear danger of mission creep. My friend Victoria Collins rightly warned that the mere discussion of extending this scheme to 13 to 16-year-olds is sinister, unnecessary, and a clear step towards state overreach. My Lords, where does this stop? The Secretary of State sought to frame this as merely a digital key to unlock better services. This dangerously conflates genuine, a desirable public service reform with a highly intrusive mandate. Firstly, the claim that this will deliver fairness and security by tackling illegal migration is nothing more than a multi-billion-pound gimmick. The Secretary of State suggests that it will deter illegal working. Yet, as my colleagues have pointed out, rogue employers who operate cash-in-hand schemes will not look at ID on a phone. Mandatory digital ID for British citizens will not stop illegal migrants working in the black economy. Secondly, the claim that the system will be free is disingenuous. As my friend, our Home Affairs spokesman Max Wilkinson demanded, the government must come clean on the costs and publish a full impact assessment. Estimates suggest creating this system will cost between £1 billion and £2 billion, with annual running costs of £100 million. This is completely the wrong priority at a time when public services are crumbling. Thirdly, the promise of inclusion rings hollow. This mandatory system risks entrenching discrimination against the millions of vulnerable people, such as older people and those on low incomes, who lack foundational digital skills, a smartphone or internet access. The greatest concern is the government's insistence on building this mandatory system on gov.uk's One Login, a platform whose security failures have been repeatedly and publicly criticised, including my own correspondence and meetings with government. there are significant concerns about OneLogin security. The government claims that OneLogin adheres to the highest security standards. Despite this commitment, as of late 2024, early 2025, the system was still not fully compliant. A GovAssure assessment found that OneLogin was meeting only about 21 of the 39 required outcomes in the NCSC cyber assessment framework. The Gov.UK OneLogin programme has told me themselves that it is committed to achieving full compliance with the cyber assessment framework by March the 21st, 2026. Yet officials have informed me that 500 services across 87 departments are already and currently in scope for the OneLogin project. There are other criticisms I could make, but essentially the foundations of the digital ID scheme are extremely unsafe, to say the least. To press ahead with a mandatory digital ID system described as a honeypot for hackers based on a platform exhibiting such systemic vulnerabilities is not only reckless, but risks catastrophic data breaches, identity theft, and mass impersonation fraud. Concentrating the data of the entire population fundamentally concentrates the risk. The Secretary of State must listen to the millions of citizens who've signed the petition against this policy. On these benches, we urge the government to scrap the costly, intrusive, and technologically unreliable scheme and instead focus on delivering voluntary, privacy-preserving digital public services that earn the public's trust rather than demanding compliance.
I'd like to thank the Noble Lords Viscount Camrose and Lord Clement Jones and the points they've raised for the government, and unsurprisingly this is an area there will be strong interest across the House, I have no doubt. I will start though by just reminding the Noble Lord Viscount Camrose of the comments of Lord Hague that the arguments against digital ID are paper thin. I will start by addressing the concerns that have been raised by both Viscount Camrose and Lord Clement Jones. In the context of the Data Use and Access Act, we were clear that the services under that legislation were not mandatory, nor were they ever designed to be, and they cover many of the areas that have been discussed so far. This new national digital ID will be required for, and specifically for, and only for, right-to-work checks by the end of this Parliament. It is a very narrow use for a very specific purpose. But we have always believed, and continue to believe, that there are huge upsides for a digitally enabled society, one where everyone feels able to participate. Everyone feels a sense of agency, and everyone's lives are made easier by a digital key that does indeed unlock access to services, something that is a big upside to a digitally enabled society. And those businesses that enable this, and we've seen this in other countries that have introduced a digital ID, and the services that those businesses provide will have an important role to play. We expect the digital identity market to be able to build on the National Digital Pass and offer value-add services for individuals and businesses. In countries where digital ID is well established, the private sector has built a wide range of services around it, making everyday tasks like open banking, renting a flat, applying for a mortgage, all faster, simpler and more secure. But that is not a mandatory use of this. The required use is for right to work. Let me turn to the subject of illegal migration, a problem that obviously has grown enormously over the past 10 to 15 years. I would absolutely agree that there is no silver bullet to solving illegal migration, but ensuring that there is a single digital system to prove that you have a right to work will simplify the process and drive up compliance, making it easier for businesses and providing the Home Office, and I think this is an important point, with an overview of employers conducting checks they can use to audit those suspected of hiring illegally. It will be possible for them to see where there are a large number of employees but only 2 or 3 that have been checked for work. Ultimately, this should be easier for honest, legitimate employers to get started and harder, much harder, for those employing illegally. The Noble Lord Clement Jones said that this was an invasion of privacy and civil liberties. I don't agree, and I think those countries which have introduced it would not agree. Digital identities preserve and increase privacy by limiting the information that individuals have to share when proving something about themselves. The credentials that are in play here are name, date of birth, information on nationality or residency status, and a photo. That is what you need for a right to work check. And the display may be as simple as a yes or no, with none of the information shared with the third party. And we will ensure that strict safeguards are in place to prevent illegal tracking or misuse of data by the government or anybody else. And the point that has been raised about how this actually works, do we end up with a big target, a honeypot? This will be a federated system, as quite rightly pointed out, it should be a federated system, not a single repository, increasing security and not creating that honeypot of data. The question that was raised about those aged 13 and upwards, this is a system designed for 16-year-olds and above. There will, as part of the consultation, be consultation about younger age groups and whether there may be utility for them. Any use of personal data will continue to be regulated by the Independent Information Commissioner's Office, and our consultation, which will be launched later this year, will consider whether further safeguards will be needed or appropriate. The question of cost was raised, and whilst I can't give you exact details of the cost, what I can say is it will be met within the existing SR budget over the SR period. One login was raised, and indeed there were problems at the beginning, and that is not unusual with the system as it's getting set up. Those problems date from 2023. Those problems have indeed been resolved, and the National Cyber Security Centre is working hand in hand to get the one login system in the place that it needs to be. The National Cyber Security Centre will be central to getting this set up as well. Finally, I want to talk about digital inclusion, a really key point raised by Viscount Camrose, and an area that's increasingly important for the times we live in. That's why this government has made digital inclusion a priority. We set out a range of first steps in the Digital Inclusion Action Plan, published in February of this year, and are working across government to improve inclusion. We know that those who don't own or can't afford a smartphone, don't already have photo ID, or have additional accessibility requirements will require special attention. And 1 in 10 people already struggle to prove their identity and access the service that they have a right to because they lack a photo ID. But this scheme is an opportunity to get them a free digital credential that proves their identity and helps them access those services. We will deliver a comprehensive inclusion programme, including face-to-face support, to ensure everyone eligible is able to access the new digital pass and benefit from it if they want to, including those using it for right-to-work checks. And it's only the right-to-work checks which is the required need for this. This will provide targeted support to those who currently struggle to engage with digital services, including options for digitally enabled physical alternative for those without a smartphone or who may experience a data poverty, such as those unable to afford the data use on their phone. We've already started to engage with a range of expert organisations and community groups, including the Digital Inclusion Action Committee, and we look forward to continuing to do so throughout the credentials design and development, a process that, as the Noble Lord Viscount Camrose has pointed out, must be done in an agile way and will require both external input and indeed government technical needs. So this is an area which I think it's a narrow use, it's an important development, and there is indeed, or it's a narrow requirement, is a broad use that I think many people already take advantage of in different forms in this country. Digital ID will make life easier for people.
Yeah. My Lord. Underpinning any individual ID scheme has to be an individual ID number. Other countries normally seem to base that on date of birth plus a scheme of other numbers. Can the Minister make clear to us whether we've decided what our system will be, and could he also tell us how far they've advanced in developing it as well, and when it's likely to be rolled out?
I thank my noble friend for the question. The consultation will start later this year, and it will be a very broad consultation to which we welcome input from many groups. And we know that this is not straightforward. It will require considerable thinking about how to get this exactly right. And the answer is we do not yet have a view on exactly how the system is designed. That will be part of the consultation process. This is not going to be something that's done overnight. It's going to require, of course, to come back to this House on many occasions, and it will be something that will have great public input as well, and technical input as we design it.
I'm very sceptical about mandatory digital ID, and I wonder if the Noble Lord the Minister could tell us just how many people at the moment don't even have a mobile phone, never name all the extra that is needed. And when the government talks about inclusion, this is one of the most exclusive kind of suggestions that wasn't even in the manifesto. But could I ask him if by any chance this actually did go through and become law, can he give an absolute commitment that it would apply to the whole of the United Kingdom, and that the government would not listen to those people who are saying that somehow digital mandatory ID in Northern Ireland would be contrary to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement?
I thank the noble lady for her point. In terms of the digital inclusion, we know, of course, that not everyone has a mobile phone. The vast majority do. I think the figure is 92% of people that do. I think that there are those who already use equivalent to some sort of digital ID form in banking and other areas as well. But there are people who don't, and that's why we're so keen to make sure that we have a digital inclusion stream right from the very beginning to try and identify what the needs of those individuals are and how we deal with people who don't have a smartphone. And there will, of course, be no requirement that you must have a smartphone. There will be a workaround for those that don't, which will enable them to have a physical manifestation of something that has a digital imprint. In terms of the very important question about Northern Ireland, I can guarantee that this applies to everyone eligible to work in the UK. It will, of course, take full account of the Northern Ireland situation, and indeed those from the island of Ireland who are eligible to work in the UK, and they will be eligible to be part of this as well.
My Lord.
I confess I'm slightly confused. The Noble Lord the Minister rightly referred to the Data Use and Access Act, and we spent a lot of time then discussing the introduction of digital verification services. At the time, those were described as having pretty much the same benefits that are described in this oral statement. In fact, the description is really uncannily similar. So could the Noble Lord the Minister please explain what are the additional benefits that this digital ID will bring, and why and how those additional benefits justify the £1 to £2 billion cost?
This new part, as I've said, is exactly about the right to work and the ability to have identity related to right to work. In doing that, that forms a platform for digital ID and the ability to use that in other ways for the services that were described in the Data Use and Access Bill.
My Lords, the Noble Lord may have seen an article in Computer Weekly in June, which in the headline talks about the e-visa system as being error-prone and anxiety-inducing. Among the cases in this extensive report was a doctor with indefinite leave to remain who'd been here for 20 years but couldn't travel to a medical conference because the IT error meant they couldn't link their official identity documents to their visa account. This report also talks about a woman they call Athena who had to take a month off work because she was so stressed by the fact that the Home Office computer couldn't match the name on her passport to the name on her account, despite the fact that her name, which had never changed, was the same on her passport, her e-visa account and her biometric residence permit. Can the Noble Lord the Minister tell me why the Noble Lord or this House should have any expectation that we wouldn't see the same situation with this proposal?
Well, I'm certainly not going to stand here and say it's going to be absolutely error-free, because nothing is. I'm not going to stand here and say it's easy, because it's not. But there is a big gain at the end of this. It's not as though this hasn't been done elsewhere. It's not as though there aren't ways in which countries have got this to work very effectively. And certainly if you were to speak to anyone from Estonia, they would think we're mad not to have it already.
My Lords, I chair the Digital Inclusion Action Committee. And I do that not because I'm a digital expert, like the two front bench people opposite and my noble friend, but because I know and have worked throughout my life on social exclusion. I know that we can do this. And if either of the two front benchers opposite or anyone else wants to come with me to a hub where they are doing this now with people who never thought they would ever get near it and who have now got digital devices which we have organised for them to get and get them free and get them properly used and properly supported, then I would love to take you to see it. Next week is Digital Inclusion Action Week, and I hope that some of you will some members will take care of that. The reality is, for many people who are socially excluded, the proposals that the government had will make a huge difference. If you are homeless, you frequently can't get into a hostel because they can't work out who you are. You can't get benefits because you've got no means. You've not got an address, so you can't get the benefit. You can't get a bank account. We're working with the banks to actually change that. We're working with not just the excluded, but with the industry, with the not-for-profit organisations that are involved, with local government, and there is enormous enthusiasm for this, because I have met people whose lives have been changed, and they want to know that they have the government on their side and that they don't have to rely on everything else that is produced in America. We do not have any security of digital ID, and you're all using iPads and phones now. And they're controlled in America by people like Elon Musk, who could not care less about your well-being and what happens to you. Let us make this secure so that people here can have confidence that their digital IT is protected and they don't have to rely on people outside who don't care about them.
Well, I thank my noble friend for that powerful statement, and one that's informed. And I'm sure that the offer that my noble friend has made to people to come and visit will be taken up by people, and I certainly would like to accept that offer myself to come at some point.
My Lords, declare my interest as I currently chair the Proof of Age Standard Scheme, which is, as it says on the tin, to prove age. So those young people who want to go out for a drink at night, want to engage in nighttime activity, go to cinemas, they have to prove their age. We are seeking to move from a purely physical card to a digital card. So I'd like to echo the confusion expressed by the noble Lord Vokes. Where are we with digital ID? Because if it's only going to be for one purpose, right to work, you're excluding from activities those young people who currently are willing to buy either a physical card or a digital card for a very modest sum, and yet they will be excluded from this free scheme because it's only for the right to work. I can quite see where the government's coming from, because there is a category of people who cannot prove their identity or their age because they don't drive, so they don't have a driving licence, they don't travel, so they don't have a passport. But I think there is a bit of confusion at the moment in the government thinking between proof of age verification and digital ID. And if that could be clarified as soon as possible, it would be extremely helpful.
Yes, and let me just try and be clear about a point that I think is important, which is the required element of this is the bit that is to do with right to work. The notion that this is available for all sorts of other things, which people can choose to be part of or not part of, is completely separate. It's the same structure that will be used, but the only mandatory part is the ability, right to work, you have to show this. And the noble lady is quite right that, of course, there are lots of things that people want to use this for now, and that's why work's going ahead already on the digital wallet and the ability to use those things. They are, of course, separate from the question of a requirement to have this for right to work.
My Lords, further to the question that has already been posed by the noble lady Hoey, I would like to ask my noble friend, the Minister, if careful consideration has been given to the circumstances on the island of Ireland, where there is quite a lot of cross-border working, both from south to north and from north to south. There is also the issue that the government should be mindful of the Good Friday Agreement, and that many people, including myself, who see my identity and their identity as Irish, wouldn't very much want a digital ID issued by the British government. So what discussions can my noble friend tell the House have taken place with the Irish government regarding this particular issue, the method of implementation, and have all those issues regarding identity and nationality been fully considered?
Well, we're fully committed, of course, to everything in the Good Friday Agreement. And my colleague, the Minister for Digital Government and Data, was in Northern Ireland just last week. He had meetings with the Deputy Speaker, Northern Ireland's Community Minister and the Finance Minister, and there's engagement with the Irish Government planned as well. This will be something that is done in close collaboration across that, recognising exactly the point that's been made about the desire of people either to have or not to have something linked to this. And of course, Ireland is introducing its own digital ID scheme as part of the EU. We intend to stay very close on this and to make sure we do this in partnership.
I've listened with interest to the exchange so far. I have an open mind on this. My noble friend Viscount Camero has raised some important questions about cost, about security and about utility. But it did strike me that it would be premature, before those questions have been fully explored, to come to a conclusion that this was something that should be opposed in principle. And I note that in a recent opinion poll, some 57% of the public were in favour of ID, and the highest level of support actually came from people who voted Conservative. So my question to the Minister is actually about what the consultation process mentioned in the statement, which is due to begin at the end of the year. Can you tell the House when that consultation will end, and what form will it take? Will it be an attempt to have a wide debate throughout the country, with documents being produced for public consumption? What exactly is the shape of the consultation? And presumably the government will be in favour of it. But what resources might be available to those who take a different view and take a different view to the government on the proposal, but may want some resources in order to campaign against it?
Well, I thank the noble Lord for those observations, and the consultation needs to be inclusive. It needs to involve various groups. It needs to give everybody a chance to input into this from societal and technical aspect. And the aim is to have a very, very widespread consultation on this to make sure that we get the right input from all parts of society. We've already talked about those that may feel excluded already. And so the intention is to have a consultation that really helps shape this. It's not a consultation just to say we've done one. It's one that's going to help shape this from every angle, and we look forward to input from right away across the House and beyond.
Can my noble friend the Minister tell the House how the government is planning to address the arguments that will be made against these proposals, and in particular in relation to concerns about individual privacy?
the argument about individual privacy is an interesting one because digital ID is a way of increasing privacy. At the moment, when you show something as part of ID, it includes all sorts of information that the person who sees it doesn't need to know and shouldn't necessarily know. A digital ID gives the chance to simply show that you meet the requirements that are needed without disclosing any more information whatsoever. So I think there are arguments that need to be well rehearsed and described out there as part of the consultation as to why this is not suddenly an increase in exposing your information to others. It's a way of protecting it, owning it, and having agency over what you do with it.
My Lords, I welcome the government's initiative. I listened with interest to the two opposition spokespersons when I think that they abandoned it back in 2010, 2011, the work that was being done, and how we've fallen so far behind, and how we've seen the number of people coming into the country working and unregistered, not paying tax, not being part of society in the fullest sense, whereas if we'd had a digital system operating, or even the old-fashioned ID system, we would have had a much bigger income coming into the country and we'd have had a much better state of affairs than we have at the moment, and we'd have deterred people from coming in, which is one of the major factors behind it. So I hope we will move quickly on that part of the exercise. On the second part, extending it over a wider front, I welcome that too. On the cost of it, I hope that the government will be innovative, that they will not think simply in the old public service terms. It is that department that's doing that, that department's doing that. I hope that we can have an umbrella organisation created, which will be government, local authorities, extend the public to charities, that we have the private sectors involved, and that we extend right to citizens and give them an incentive to join up, as mentioned by a noble lady, about rights for young people to go and drink, and cover issues like that within the ID system, and that we will try and have a completely new structure compared to what we've had in the past.
Well, I thank my noble friend's comments on migration, and I agree. This is one way in which one can detect whether there is illegal employment going on, and it will be a deterrent, because the ease with which people can be employed here is part of the reason it's an attractive place to come. In terms of the way in which we go about doing this, I think in addition to the points that my noble friend has raised, it's worth looking at what happened in other countries where businesses became very involved in saying, once this is set up, how do we start being part also of creating services to allow people to do things more easily? And I expect that to be a very major part of that. We've already got business sectors beginning to think about how they can use this approach to provide better services, better link up, better access, and I think that private sector involvement is going to be important for the uses that people want. They're not mandatory uses, they're uses that make life easier for people.
My Lords, I've just been at the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly, so I have to say it's reassuring to hear that there will be close coordination and cooperation on this issue. And I also welcome the response on social exclusion and those issues, although I would say, in my experience, increasingly low-paid workers have to have a mobile phone because that's the way you get the job and carry out the work. But I have heard about the benefits of the mandatory requirement in respect of a digital ID and the right to work to business. But I'd be very grateful if my noble friend, the Minister, could say in layperson's language, what is the benefit to the average worker?
The benefit to the average worker is that they are being employed by an honest company in the right way, and they're not having their jobs taken by people who shouldn't be working. This should be a very easy, quick thing to do. It should be very easy for the person wanting a job and very easy for the company as well, and will exclude people who haven't got a right to work.
Further to the answer that the noble Lord gave to the noble Baroness, and myself on Northern Ireland. I think it would be helpful, because every time anyone says anything about this issue, a minister in different places in part of the United Kingdom, something slightly different comes out of it. Could he look carefully at this and perhaps write a letter to myself and the noble lady and put it in the library of specifically how this is going to be implemented in Northern Ireland if it should become law?
Yes.
My Lords, I'm afraid the time for backbench questions has expired. Shall we take a short pause before I call next business?